Hey guys. So I have been, I got a cold. I'm okay now. I think I'm good. I think I'm better. Today's the first day that I feel great. Um, but I'm sorry I haven't been live as I said I would be. I'm just going to not say anything anymore and just do it because every time I do it never works out. However, so this is going to be for my OGs out there. All of them knew that I used to go live and I used to read to them all the time. And honestly, it was peaceful. I love reading and to just share facts and knowledge with people. It was great. Probably my favorite time that I did it was when I was with Nun Nun. That book was, she was right. That Chaos book about Charles Manson and the CIA. I mean, that was mind blowing. Probably one of the best books I've ever read, to be honest. But she's no longer here. I miss her. Um, But since forever, actually, I've been wanting to read this book called The Horrors of Fox Hollow Farm. I've just obsessed with this case because not only is it true crime, but it's paranormal. That's the farm right there. Beautiful, right? So the serial killer's name is Herb Baumeister. It's called Fox Hollow Farm. The people who own it now is Robert Graves. He owns it with his wife. So this was taken back when, well, the police took this. That is a mannequin. That's what you're looking at. So that this here, that is in the pool room. It's an indoor in-ground pool in the basement. And so there's like a kitchenette there. But that thing right there with the hair and the sweater, that's a mannequin. He had mannequins naked and dressed up all around that pool. That's weird to me.
And now Joe hasn't heard anything.
Okay, I've been looking for this and I forgot that I even had it. I actually took this April 28th, it looks like. So this is Mr. Ballin. He was talking about this case as well. And he is the only one that I could find that actually had the EVP recording of what I was trying to tell you guys before of the man who was living in, not the home, but it was living in the apartment beside the farm. He worked with Robert, who also owns this farm. And he actually did an EVP session and he had asked, like, who's in here messing with me? Like, who's trying to hurt me? And it said the married one. All the victims were not married. They were all single gay men. The only married one was Herb Baumeister. Take a listen.
He's not heard any confirmation that, there's someone in the room. He actually felt quite silly doing it. He takes his phone back to his computer because he takes his dog growling as maybe somehow confirmation that there was something there. And he downloads the audio file and he listens to it. And as he's listening to the file, right after he asks about is there anybody in the kitchen, he gets a response.
Who keeps walking in the kitchen?
Who's in the kitchen? The married one. And so as Joe is looking through all their files, he's seeing that every single victim was single.
Mm-hmm.
No one's married. They're all young men who are single. The only one who was married involved in this case was none other than the serial killer himself,
Herb Baumeister. That's creepy. All right, now I'm going to read you a story. All right, so this is the book that I am reading from. Robert Graves is the owner of this farm, and Richard Estep, he's actually written many books of the paranormal and on serial killers. So you should check him out. He's got a lot on Amazon. Let me know if you hear, I don't know, whispering or any type of noises, knocking, banging, shuffling, singing, anything, because my house has been acting up quite a bit lately, and I do believe it's because it's almost that time. It's almost Halloween. It's almost Devil's Night. The veil is being lifted, so to speak. All right. So this is the introduction. On the face of it, the two of us might seem to be an unlikely pairing for a writing partnership, meaning Richard and Robert. One of us is a car dealer who performs autopsies on behalf of the coroner, while the other is a paramedic who spends his vacation traveling the world investigating haunted houses. One is soft spoken and mild mannered, whereas the other is loud and boisterous. We came together with the intent of investigating and writing about one of the most bizarre, fascinating, and downright disturbing cases of paranormal activity on record: the haunting of Fox Hollow Farm. Located in a peaceful and picturesque part of Indiana, Fox Hollow Farm was once the home of one Herbert Baumeister. By outside appearances, Baumeister was a successful businessman, devoted family man, and a pillar of the community, albeit one who went by the nickname of Weird Herb. Yet during the mid 1990s, authorities discovered something horrific in the woods behind the farm. At first, hundreds, and then finally thousands of bones and human remains were found, scattered all across the grounds and down into the creek. Detectives suddenly realized what had happened to all the men who had gone missing from gay communities in Indianapolis, along with others who had turned up dead along the side of the interstate. Weird Herb now had a new nickname. People were calling him the I-70 Strangler. Okay, so there is a book written on the I-70 Strangler. And it has come out that they believe that he was the I-70 Strangler, not just or Baumeister, the weird guy, Weird Herb, or the one who owned this farm and was a serial killer to just gay men. They actually connected him to these murders as well. So that was well, that's crazy. But unfortunately, he was able to evade justice. Fleeing to Canada, Baumeister took his own life on a lonely beach, thus closing the book on one of the most prolific serial murderers in American history. He drove to Canada. It was in Ontario, I believe. I think. I could be wrong. And he was in his car and he had a gun and he took his own life in the car. Or so it seemed. Fox Hollow Farm is a unique place in many ways, not least being the fact that it's one of the few places in which a serial killer committed his vile acts that has been left standing. In fact, not only is it still standing, but it's actually a lived in private residence home to a family. Such a thing is unusual. Consider the Oxford Apartments in Milwaukee, for example, where self professed cannibal killer Jeffrey Dahmer murdered 12 men, storing their remains in his bedroom and kitchen. The entire building was demolished in 1992, and at the time of writing, is nothing more than an empty, weed infested lot. The Chicago home of John Wayne Gacy, who sexually assaulted and killed at least 33 young men, was also torn down. When a subsequent owner of the property built a new house on the same piece of ground, he found it necessary to change the street address in order to throw off ghoulish sightseers. While many people find the subject of serial killers to be understandably fascinating, it is fair to say that some of them take it too far. The locations in which the murders took place can attract a lot of unwanted attention, drawing people in like moths to a flame. I'll also show you some photos from the book. Nobody wants their neighborhood to have the haunted murder place in it, as the citizens of Amityville, Long Island will attest. I would myself, but that's just me. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue was made world famous, or perhaps more accurately, infamous, by the best selling book, The Amityville Horror, and its subsequent movie adaptation. While the murders that took place in the house were an absolute, undeniable fact, there has been much debate about the supposed haunting of the property. While none of the owners and the Lutz family have reported paranormal activity there, they have experienced a constant stream of tourists eager to catch their own glimpse of the place where a violent tragedy took place. Things got so bad that the owners removed the two upper windows, which gave the house such a distinctive visual profile, and changed the address from 112 to 108. So they took the windows of the soul, out of the house. To this day, people in the neighborhood refuse to discuss the murders or to point people in the direction of the house, and the police department keeps a sharp eye out for trespassers, especially at the height of the tourist season. The Fox Hollow Farm stands largely unchanged from its condition at the time of the murders. It still is the same address, and the current owners have made no attempt to remove or conceal the large wooden sign that shows its name, which has stood prominently at the end of the driveway for more than 20 years. Owner Robert Graves is undeniably the forefront expert on the Fox Hollow haunting. He and his family have lived with the haunting day in and day out from the very first time they set foot inside their new home. At the time of writing, in the spring of 2019, they are still living with it. Along with his wife, Vicky, Rob to his friends, agreed to open the house and grounds up to a paranormal investigator named Richard Estep in 2015. The agreement was a simple one. Richard had his team would have follow access to every part of the 18-acre estate. They would investigate using whatever techniques and equipment they wanted and to report their results back to the Grace family at the end of it all. During their stay, which was split over 2 visits at 2 different times of the year, Richard and his fellow investigators spent many hours attempting to unravel the mysteries of the Fox Hollow Farm haunting. The book that you now hold in your hands is the end result of the process, telling the story of the investigation from beginning to end, but it's also more than that. Key insights into the crimes and the paranormal activity at Foxhole have provided by eyewitnesses such as Tony Harris, who knew Herb Baumeister personally, Joe LeBlanc, whose arrival at Fox Hollow Farm appeared to kickstart the paranormal activity spectacularly. Other paranormal investigators have offered their own perspectives. Robert Graves has become something of a student of Herb Baumeister, both the man and the murderer. It's easy to see why. Living in the same house, walking the same hallways, and sleeping in the same bedroom have made Rob understandably curious about the former owner of Fox Hollow Farm. He spent many hours delving into the facts and in the miniature of the Baumeister murders, speaking directly with those who worked on the investigation. The sections of the book that discuss the life of Herb Baumeister, the killings, and the aftermath were handled by Rob. Richard had written about the paranormal aspects of the haunting. All right, the first chapter is called Weird Herb. So Herb Baumeister was born on April 7th, 1947, in the city of Indianapolis, Indiana, to Dr. Herbert E. Baumeister and Elizabeth Baumeister. He was one of 4 children in a Midwestern middle-class family. The Baumeister family had a home in the Butler-Tarkington area of Indianapolis, not far from Butler University. Their neighborhood was close to a hospital where Dr. Baumeister practiced as an anesthesiologist. By all accounts, the family was well liked and, by outward appearances, seemed absolutely normal by most common standards. It came to light that, during the time at elementary school, Herb had once placed a dead crow on his teacher's desk in order to elicit a response from her. He had also posed a question to other classmates about what it would be like to drink your own urine. Hardly criminal behavior, but odd nonetheless. Herb's father had his son psychologically tested in secret. Although very limited records still exist, the test results offered a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and there was possibly more than one personality present. It would appear that the older Baumeister saw the warning signs early on. When it came time for Herb to attend high school in 1961, he enrolled in North Central. The school is a large public institution on the north side of Indianapolis, well known for having a strong athletic program. Herb was an average student and never quite fit in with the in crowd. After graduating from high school in 1965, he enrolled at Indiana University. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given what would come later, his declared major was anatomy. He had hoped to follow in his father's footsteps and become a doctor. That's scary. During his time at Indiana University, he met the young woman who would go on to become his wife, a woman we will call Jane. The two were drawn to each other because of their similar political views, among other things. In 1967, Herb dropped out of school and returned to Indianapolis. At this time, with his father's help, he started working for the Indianapolis Star, which was Indianapolis' oldest and largest daily newspaper. He was known by his coworkers at the paper for being efficient and always well-dressed. In 1971, Herb and Jane were married. She was working as a teacher. At some point in 1972, Herb spent 2 months in a psychiatric hospital in Indianapolis, apparently due to an emotional breakdown over a car problem. Following his release, Herb took a job at the Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles. During this time, he exhibited some very odd behavior. For Christmas that year, Herb sent out cards to his BMV coworkers that were fronted by a photograph of himself and another man, both dressed in drag. For some reason, he also urinated on a letter that was addressed to the governor of Indiana. It was this stunt that ultimately cost him his job at the BMV. Just to let you know, this is the first time I'm reading this book, so a lot of this is new to me. Wow. In 1979, Herb and Jane welcomed their first child, a daughter, to the family. She was joined by a brother in 1981 and another sister in 1984. By all accounts, Herb was a devoted father and a husband, a man who doted on his children. The kids all attended private schools, and the family spent a great deal of time at Herb's parents' condominium at Lake Wassee. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, in northern Indiana. The lake is about 2.5 hours north of Indianapolis, and the family had access to boats and jet skis. Herb went out of his way to lavish extravagant gifts on his children, sparing no expense. It was during this time that, in 1985, that Herb was arrested for driving drunk while visiting the lake home. The accident was a hit and run. A year later, he was arrested for being involved in a possible insurance fraud scheme, but was acquitted after a short bench trial. He even looks like such a. There's something about him. You know what I mean? I can see it. I can feel it. Despite a pattern of increasingly erratic behavior, his luck was holding out for now. In 1988, Herb and Jane borrowed $4,000 from Herb's recently widowed mother. The money was intended to start up a thrift store business that would call Save a Lot. The idea was to take donated household items and clothing and then resell them. A part of the proceeds would go to benefit the Indianapolis Children's Bureau, the oldest children's charity in Indianapolis. The Baumeisters would take a portion of the proceeds as personal income for the operating the business. The first store did so well that in 1990, the couple opened a second store on the north side of Indianapolis. On the surface, at least, there was no indication that Herb was hiding a dark secret. Excuse me. A secret that involved a section of society that had suddenly found itself the target of a serial predator. The Indianapolis gay population was and still is a close-knit group. It has been well known among members of that community that for several years running, an increasing number of young men had either turned up dead or simply disappeared without a trace. This had all seemed to start in 1985 with the unexplained death of Eric Roediger, a 17-year-old white male whose body was found abandoned not far from the roadside in Indiana. Herb was 38 years old at the time. In 1989 came the discovery of a body along Interstate 70 in Hancock County, just east of Indianapolis. The unfortunate young man was 26-year-old Stephen Elliott. His death was followed in 1990 by that of Clay Boatman, a 32-year-old whose murdered remains were found on the route between Indianapolis and Columbus. During that period, running from 1980 to 1990, at least 9 other bodies would be found between Indianapolis and Columbus, Ohio. Although it was never definitively proven that Herb Baumeister was responsible for these murders, his wife would later go on to tell the authorities that Herb had traveled to Ohio on business more than 100 times during the period that they owned their Save-A-Lot stores. Perhaps coincidentally, or perhaps not, in the fall of 1991, bodies suddenly stopped being found along the side of the road between those two cities. The reason for that was simple. The killer had turned his attention to victims that could be found a little closer to home. Herb's new home, Fox Hollow Farm. Wow. In 1991, after several prosperous years of running their Save-A-Lot thrift stores, Herb and Jane went shopping for a new home. They soon came across a property listing that looked absolutely perfect. The 18.5-acre estate was, of course, Fox Hollow Farm. They loved it. It was located away from the big city and that their children would have plenty of space in which to play. Fortunately for them, as things turned out, it just so happened that the current owner was motivated to sell. The asking price was just $979,000, a great value for such a grand property. The current owner agreed to sell the farm on contract, accepting a modest down payment and the promise of full payment within 5 years. The arrangement was perfect for the young family. For a time, life was good at Fox Hollow Farm. The children were thriving in private schools, and the family's business was doing well. Sorry, didn't mean to do that, but there you go. On the Indianapolis bar scene, young gay men from downtown Indianapolis area were still turning up missing. May 1993 saw the disappearances of Michael Riley and Johnny Albert. They were followed in July 1993 by Jeffrey Jones and Richard Hamilton. Then in August 1993 by Alan Livingstone. Many suspected, though nobody knew for sure, that a serial killer was at work. A serial killer who targeted young gay men, preferably those who would most likely never be missed. The serial predator was every bit as busy in 1994. In April, Stephen Hale disappeared. June and July marked the disappearances of Alan Broussard, Roger Allen Godlet, respectively. All the young men who had disappeared were reported missing by their family members, but the police department had no idea that one man was behind it all. The family of Roger Allen Goodlet, one of the missing men, was so intent on finding out what happened to their loved one that they hired a private detective to get them the answers that the police department wasn't delivering. That private detective was a retired Marion County sheriff and also happened to be a polygraph expert. He immediately set about trying to figure out what had happened to Roger. He put up missing persons photos in and around the gay bars of Indianapolis, visually each one and talking to anybody who might know anything about Roger's disappearance. The missing persons cases were being handled by the Indianapolis Police Department. They dutifully recorded what little information was available and wasn't a great deal to go on. The common thread in all the disappearances seemed to be the area from which the men were missing. Every single one of them had last been seen in one of the gay bars downtown, and each had disappeared in the warmer months of the year. Other than that, nobody knew a thing. All right, this is now chapter 2. This is titled The Predator. One midnighty summer, a man showed up at one of the bars. He was not a regular at all at that particular bar. The man was seen staring at a missing persons poster for Roger Allen Goodlet. One regular bar patron, a man who went by the name of Tony Harris, approached the man and indicated the poster with a nod of his head, asked, "Do you know him?" The man said that he did not. He was lying. At this point, the newcomer, who was actually her Baumeister, gave the name Brian Smart. Tony related that while Brian was reading the missing persons poster, his concern did not appear to be genuine. Yeah, no shit. The two soon fell into deep conversation. It ended with Brian asking Tony if he wanted to go back to his employer's home for a swim in the indoor pool. Tony agreed to go along, and Brian suggested that they should drive separately. Tony said that he would prefer that they go in the same car. His main concern was that he wanted his car left at the bar so that if he should turn up missing like so many other men had, somebody would hopefully see it there and come looking for him. Smart man. Somewhat reluctantly, Tony got into Brian's car, Brian being her Baumeister. And they drove north, leaving the bright lights of the city far behind. Although Tony tried to engage in small talk, Brian did not say a lot. Before long, the asphalt of the city gave way to the greener suburbs north of Indianapolis. They turned off from US Highway 31 and onto a 2-lane rural road that was lined with horse farms. They soon came to a driveway. Afterward, Tony would recall noticing a sign that read, "Something Farm." It was dark, however, and he could not quite read it all. They drove down a long and winding driveway, finally arriving at a very large house that Tony described as a mansion. There were several dogs running around, and Tony was told to not pet them. The house itself was completely dark. Herb claimed that the power was turned off upstairs, but was still on in the basement where the pool was. The pool was his killing ground, you guys. The two men entered via a garage door and made their way to some stairs that led down into the basement. Just as Brian had promised, there was indeed a swimming pool. He motioned to a room directly across from the pool and said that Tony could change in there if he wanted to. Brian was already in the pool when Tony emerged from changing room. Their water was very warm, and with the sliding patio doors all fully open to let the cold night air in, a thick fog hung low over the surface of the pool. Tony slid slowly down into the water. "Hey, Herb," as if a great idea had suddenly just occurred to him. "Do you want to see a neat trick? So Herb said, "Hey, do you want to see a neat trick?" Oh my God. He went on to explain that if you were to squeeze somebody, trigger warning. He went on to explain that if you were to squeeze somebody's neck in order to cut off the blood flow to the brain, it could cause the most intense orgasm imaginable. Intrigued but still somewhat reluctant, Tony hesitantly said that he would be willing to give it a try. Herb took the length of the pool hose that was floating on top of the water and gently placed it around Tony's neck, caressing the skin lightly with the smooth plastic. Then he began to tighten it, slowly but surely. Herb started strangling Tony, pulling the hose tighter and tighter with every passing second. Red dots danced before Tony's eyes, and he began to feel lightheaded. Yet still, Herb kept up the pressure. What was this? He wondered. Did Herb intend to kill him? Letting his arms and legs go loose, Tony pretended to pass out, falling backward onto the pool. All was quiet for a few seconds, and then, much to Herb's surprise, Tony opened his eyes. It's you, Herb. You are hurting people, he accused the other man. I have no choice. I'm going to the police. No one's going to believe a person like you, Herb shot back. Tony knew that he was right, but nonetheless, he had to try. If this man was behind all the disappearances, the first thing he had to do was get out of there alive. That meant appeasing him for now. The two men got down to partying, making good use of the fully stocked wet bar before finally Herb passed out on a couch in an adjacent room. The following morning, he drove Tony back to the bar in downtown Indianapolis. I can't believe you stayed the night. I had a good time, Herb told him, as though nothing untoward had happened, and I'd very much like to see you again. Tony went straight to the Indianapolis Police Department and told them that there was a man who lived in a mansion somewhere in Hamilton County who was picking up gay men and strangling them. Unfortunately, Tony could not give any accurate description of the killer's home. The police advised Tony to try and get a license plate number in the event that the individual ever came back into the bar. This was the official version of the events that Tony Harris described to the detectives who questioned him. It must be pointed out that Tony himself is the only living source for what happened at Box Hollow Farm that night. He's the only survivor. Unquestionably, Tony Harris did go to the authorities and reported what had happened to him at Box Hollow Farm in the company of Brian Smart, aka Herb Baumeister. Were it not for his willingness to step forward, the case may not have been broken so quickly as it was, and more men would almost certainly have died. For this, he is to be commended. Tony would maintain that he only visited Box Hollow Farm on that one occasion, yet in the future interviews, he would alter his story, admitting to having had a romantic relationship with Herb and engaging in liaisons with him whenever the opportunity presented itself. How does Tony address the fact that his story has changed over the years? Does he feel that it cast doubt on its credibility as a witness? According to him, at the first night at Fox Hollow Farm, he was certain that Herb was the man who was killing off his friends from the gay community, and Tony's main concern was getting the murders to stop. He was caught in something of a catch-22 situation. However, because he had also developed feelings for the man he knew as Brian Smart, and admitting that he was involved with the killer romantically could be tantamount to being an accomplice, at least in the eyes of many people. Later on in this book, we will hear Tony's own account of what else happened that night at Fox Hollow Farm and discover the crucial missing pieces that he left out of his testimony. That fucker. It makes me mad. The private investigator was now fully immersed in his investigation. He couldn't help noticing that a rather disturbing pattern was beginning to emerge. The deeper he dug into the morass of disappearances, the more he came to believe that a serial killer was operating in central Indiana, preying primarily on members of the gay community. The private investigator interviewed Tony at length and gleaned as much information as he could from the description regarding the place that he had been brought to that night. Tony told him that it was a large property, one with a long, winding drive and horse fencing. On the strength of that, he drove all around southern Hamilton County in the general vicinity of where he thought that Tony may have been. Unfortunately, there were just so many horse farms in that area. It was the equivalent of trying to find a needle in a haystack, and the private investigator simply could not locate it. He even went so far as to obtain aerial photographs from the county surveyor's office and spotted what he thought might be the right sort of place. After showing Tony the photo, however, his only eyewitness was unsure if it truly was the correct location. He was right back at square one. Both the private investigator and the officers of the Indianapolis Police Department gave Tony the same piece of advice. If your Brian comes back into the bar, then come hell or high water, you have to get his license plate number. The winter of 1994 came and went without any discernible progress on any of the missing persons cases. Just as Tony was beginning to think he would never see the mysterious man again, the weather improved in the spring, and lo and behold, Brian, aka Herb, showed up in the bar again. Tony felt a little uneasy about sneaking outside from under Brian's watchful eye in order to obtain his license plate number, so he requested that a friend go and write it down. Once it was in his possession, Tony dutifully gave the number to the Indianapolis missing persons detective assigned to the case, who in turn ran it through the Bureau of Motor Vehicles computer database. The car came back registered to Herb Baumeister, whose street address was listed as being on Fox Hollow Farm. Jackpot. This was the first truly solid lead in the case and had already spanned several years. Detectives wasted no time in going straight to Mr. Baumeister's business to question him. A detective whom we will refer to as Marcia Warren of the Indianapolis Police Department was assigned to the Missing Persons Division. She had received several reports from families and missing relatives, but so far hadn't been able to connect the dots. Now, along with tips from the private investigator and Tony Harris, capped off by the very solid lead provided by the license plate number, it was time to ask Herb Baumeister a few choice questions. Marcia drove to the Save-A-Lot store to the West Washington Street in Indianapolis. She went inside and walked up to the counter. An employee asked how she could help her. Marcia asked to speak to Mr. Baumeister. The employee replied that he was in the back right now, but she would be happy to go and fetch him. Herb appeared from a back room and approached Marcia. He greeted her in a friendly manner, offering her a handshake. She asked Herb straight away if he ever visited gay bars in Indianapolis. Holy, she's right to the point. Herb was very quickly and adamantly denied ever having set foot in a gay bar. She countered with the fact that they had multiple eyewitnesses' testimony to the contrary and that she had gotten his license plate number from one of those very same witnesses. At that point, visibly shaken from the confrontation, Herb finally admitted that yes, he did in fact visit the bars from time to time, but his family was not aware of it. Marcia felt that his reaction might be justified. After all, he and his wife had been married for 25 years and they had 3 children. Marcia told him at that point that in time she was investigating the disappearance of some men who had gone missing from within those bars, and she felt he might know something or be involved. Can we search your property? She asked in her most reasonable tone of voice. At this point, Herb clammed up. He flatly denied any involvement whatsoever with disappearances and told Marcia that if she had any further questions that she should be directed to his lawyer. Herb's lawyer was a very well-known criminal defense attorney in Indianapolis. Any citizen of prominent standing who happened to get into legal trouble would usually call him first. Marcia Warren called the attorney's office and said that she would like to search the Baumeister property. The attorney responded by saying that he had no idea who in the world Herb Baumeister was. Huh? Puzzled, Marcia returned to the Save-A-Lot store to confront Herb, only to be told once again, talk to my lawyer. Herb reiterated that the attorney's name for the second time, insisting that the lawyer was indeed representing him. Marcia called the law office again and was exasperated to get the same response. Nobody at the law firm had ever heard of Herb Baumeister, so back she went to the thrift store. To say that she was frustrated with it would be an understatement. By the third visit, Herb had managed to get a retainer check sent to the law office. No, the attorney now insisted, you cannot search Mr. Baumeister's property. Marcia was up against a brick wall, having what she felt was a prime suspect in her sights, but possessing insufficient evidence to allow her to obtain a search warrant. Enter a well-known forensic anthropologist from the University of Indianapolis. Looking for a fresh approach, Marcia contacted him for some suggestions about how she might be able to get a look at the property without actually setting foot on it. The doctor suggested an aerial survey that would enable her to get view of the property from the air and, if she was lucky, possibly see any potential burial spots. A police helicopter was duly requisitioned, and Marcia, along with the doctor, ventured out to fly over the Baumeister property. The helicopter was equipped with an infrared camera so that if there was bodies buried on the property, it was hoped that the heat emitted during the decomposition process would be visible. The helicopter pilot took them over the house and grounds, focusing on the woods behind the main house. Unfortunately, nothing out of the ordinary was visible. Either there was no bodies there, or perhaps it had been too long since a body was last deposited in that area. Once again, Marcia would need to find another way. All right, you guys, I am going to end there. And I'll come back and read again tomorrow night, the next night. I used to do this for my OGs all the time. We had a lot of fun doing it. And a lot of them have been in and out of hospital or in hospice. Sorry, not hospice, hospice. And, you know, a lot of people don't want to hear me screaming or bitching about Gabby and Lori and this and that all the time. And it's Halloween. So I really wanted to read this book. So I thought I'd share it with you. Anyways, I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you in the comments.